think you need a permit to worship in a church.
You don't have to, because it's religious freedom, Radio Canada. It's religious freedom. Do you know that? Religious freedom. You don't need a permit to worship, Radio Canada.
Well,
do you remember growing up and, your parents or teachers would say things to you like, pick your battles? Well, it turns out CBC and the government of Canada did not get that same type of upbringing. That honestly answers a lot of questions now that I think about it. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, follow, like, and comment your thoughts down below. Isn't it so baffling that the only reason why we know anything that's going on in our country is through the government-approved messaging, coming directly from them or coming through their talking heads? That is the mainstream media in this country, and they do lie a lot. We know that to be an absolute fact. Well, Donald Trump has called their bluff, and if he wasn't already furious with Canada, I'm pretty sure the war they are picking right now with a Christian singer might be the final nail in the coffin. Also, the Liberals have determined who it is that's really driving the housing crisis, and shocker, haha, it's not them. Nope, not them or their policies, but the persons that they're blaming for the shortage, the crisis, the cost is going to make your eyes roll so far in the back of your head. Just a fair warning. All that and more coming up today on Over Opinionated.
I'll touch on one other issue in the presence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is security. Security in this part of the world, security across in this part of our country, I should say, and security across for Canada. There are new threats that have emerged. Physical threats, virtual threats, tangible threats. We take those threats seriously. We take our responsibility to defend all Canadians seriously. It's the first thing we think about when we get up in the morning. The Minister of National Defense does not sleep. He does not get up in the morning because of these threats.
I really do hope when Parliament resumes that the Conservatives will start really pressing Mark Carney on his language when he speaks. Oh, these threats, they're so bad and tangible and physical. What are you referring to, sir? Like, actually, what are you referring to? Is it Donald Trump? Is that what you're trying to insinuate? That's kind of how I took that. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe you're referring to some of the protests going on in the streets, but you couldn't be referring to that because, you haven't done anything about it at all. So very bold rhetoric, tough speech for soft policies. I'll give you that much. But, his omission of what the actual threats are to Canada, such as mass migration, little pockets of things that nobody has an eye about, the fact that there's millions of people in the country that are undocumented. We have no idea where they are. They may not even be here. They could have crossed over to the U.S. We have no clue because we don't have an eye on them. And also, just again, the omission that the biggest threats in Canada that we see today, which are from radical protest movements, unchecked extremism, unchecked immigration and policy inconsistency, as well as a two-tier policing system, all of those things are coming from within. Those are the real threats that we have in Canada, and those threats remain largely unchecked and silenced by Liberal policies to censor the news, the media, your algorithms.
And it is extremely important. For Canada's part, we have committed over $300 million of humanitarian aid, primarily through international organizations. That aid puts Canada at number 3 in terms of the countries who have committed humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Let's just really break this down, okay? And I'm not saying this based on some personal belief. I'm reporting to you exactly what I'm finding in my research. It makes no sense to continue to deliver money to Gaza as humanitarian aid. And it really does reveal more about Canada's political priorities than it does about any actual humanitarian impact whatsoever. And why do I say that? Well, number one, it's very rare that aid is sent through a neutral party. In fact, it's sent through usually Hamas-controlled or very near Hamas-controlled organizations, areas, things like that. So to have a $300 million brag about sending aid to a region of which is largely controlled by Hamas, Hamas still, despite concerns about aid diversion, despite concerns about terror infiltration in agencies like UNRWA, of which Canada has continued to fund, by the way, despite the fact that there was a number of people accused and fired for actually being a part of October 7th, by the way. And also the fact that Canadians themselves are facing an extraordinary domestic affordability crisis. If anything, half the countries we give aid to should be sending it to us. Why is it that we give money to China to help them develop things and repair their roads, as an example? That can all be found on the government website. Yet our roads are crumbling and our infrastructure is horrendous.
We can pray differently. We can gather in different places of worship. But all of us come together, all of us must come together around the values of Eid. The values of community, of generosity, and yes, of sacrifice. These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
Yet, Mark Carney will continue to tolerate ministers and finances, your tax dollars, flowing to hostile regimes at home, and then also painting the United States as this big, bad boogeyman. I don't understand how any of that is taking security seriously or caring about our defense, it being the first thing you think about in the morning. Yeah, I really doubt that one. Yeah, he certainly says he doesn't sleep, and Canada's security is the first thing on his mind. If that were true, people would not be chanting death to Canada and burning our flag on the streets and face no consequences at all. And if I can be completely frank, and I have thought about this long and hard to really come to the conclusion that this isn't some conspiracy theory I have. This is very much correlated with intent, with things that they have actually said publicly, passed legislatively, and produced in terms of what the real world outcomes were for the country. So what I have managed to conclude is that we have a pattern here in Canada of very intentional restructuring, not some random mismanagement.
I have a tremendous amount of asylum seekers that are up in Etobicoke and in the hotels. They're healthy, they're willing to work, they're hardworking people, but they're waiting over 2 years. And they're just sucking off the system nonstop, not their fault. The fault falls under immigration, that it takes over 2 years to get a work permit. So as we're paying education, paying healthcare, paying their rent in hotels, which is exorbitant, they want to get out there and they want to be like every other Canadian. They want to find a job. They want to be able to first start off renting a condo or part of a house and then buying a house. But we're tired of waiting around. I can't wait around. It's costing our province an absolute fortune. Just last year, we were close to 100,000 asylum seekers, and I'm still waiting to get paid back from the federal government. That's one issue. But there's jobs available in Ontario, and we need to give them work permits and make sure that they're out there working and contributing back to society. I'm not waiting any longer. We're issuing work permits in Ontario for these folks to give back and contribute to society in Ontario.
You know what's really interesting is Ontario as an example. I don't know, Ontarians, you can let us know in the comments down below. Are there jobs? Are there jobs available? Are there jobs for born Canadians, by the way, who are accepting a Canadian wage, not people who are going to work under the table or anything like that? Ontario alone has one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the entire country. I'm quite sure it's 15.8%, 15.7%, something like that. And amongst adults, it's also very high, between 6 to 7% as well, unemployment. And a lot of people like that are very much wanting to work. They just can't find a job. I mean, there's stories on the news all the time of people in job fairs that for a Tim Hortons that has like 200 people in line, or people who have sent in thousands of resumes and have yet to hear back. And you know what's really crazy, though, is it's about 1 in 6 people in Ontario can't find a job, even though the overall unemployment rate is less than half of that. And this isn't a short-term hangover. This is a systemic failure, partly due to mass immigration that's driving competition. It's driving the housing crisis, and it's also driving a lack of vocational opportunities.
Fewer seniors downsizing their homes appear to be hurting first-time home buyers. Housing expert Mike Moffat says when seniors decide to stay in place, that can hold back young families from moving into larger properties and keep some first-time buyers out of entry-level homes.
And who does CTV bring on as an expert in home prices? Well, it's some dude who says that it's not mass immigration, it's not inflation, it's not government spending, government policies that are causing the housing crisis. No, it is Canadian seniors. Natural-born Canadians in most cases, or if they are immigrants, they've been here for an awfully long time. It's their fault. It's nobody else's fault. Notice the target of all of these things. Who is the target? And of course, they blame the natural-born Canadian citizens. Of course, I'm generalizing here, while ignoring the real facts. I mean, the CMHC even said that we needed 3.5 million homes by 2030 to restore affordability. In 2023, as an example, we built less than 250,000. There's zoning, there's red tape, there's carbon taxes, there's restrictions and municipal overreach, as well as provincial, federal freaking overreach everywhere that is absolutely strangling development. It's not because retirees are staying put in their forever home that they plan to pass down to their children, something that used to be incredibly common back in the day. Mass immigration has fueled that demand. The CMHC and Scotiabank have confirmed this, that immigration without equivalent housing supply is driving prices up. Investor-owned properties compared to aged-in-place homes, if you want to call it that, in Toronto and also Vancouver, by the way, up 30% of homes that are actually owned by investors. And Mark Carney wants homes to be owned by the government next. Foreign buyers, real estate trusts, wealthy landlords, hoarding units. That's the problem if you want to try to divert blame in that way, which even that I don't honestly think is a great argument because, again, the end cause is still not that. It is still the amount of people. It's not pensioners to blame for this who are clipping roses in their backyards after they've worked their entire life for a government that's taken all of their freaking money.
To the United States, almost 30% of them are now redirecting to other countries. So they're starting to diversify who they trade with. And over 37% of them, so over a third, are starting to source from outside the United States, the components, the ingredients, the parts they need to make their things. And so what that signals to us at the Canadian Chamber is that we're seeing Canadian companies not trust this relationship as much as they have in the past and start to diversify who they trade with. And for the well-being of our economy over the longer term, that's not a negative thing. The more diversified our trade, the more resilient we are and the lower risk we have.
And while, yes, he's not incorrect there, it is important to diversify your trade. We should have been doing it always. Let's really unpack why that is happening, though. It's because of how successfully Canadian media, as well as the government, have framed Donald Trump and the United States as our absolute enemies. Right? And so to say that, oh, well, you know, it's actually a good thing that Canadians are pulling away from our closest ally and our biggest trading partner going forward. It's good that they're all very dramatically doing this right now after a series of events that have unfolded in really not that long of a period of time.
August 1st is going to come, and we will have most of our deals finished, if not all. We haven't really had a lot of luck with Canada. I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs, not really a negotiation.
And the fact that Mark Carney, despite running on, I'm a negotiator.
I'm a good negotiator. I have negotiated a number of situations in the past. I know how to manage crises. I know what you do in the order you can control things.
This isn't just a shift in supply chains either. And you know, the Canadian government is saying, yeah, the U.S. is so evil and nasty and bad. We need to stop supporting them. We need to stop doing business with them. You guys should really start realigning all of your trade relationships, your travel, everything with countries like China, like the EU and others that are already tied to our global elitist preferred trade routes and business partners and people who are all in the same club as us that Donald Trump isn't in. It is quietly dismantling the Canada-U.S. economic partnership. And Carney and the Liberals are cheering this on as though it's this amazing thing. Well, if it was an amazing thing, I imagine we would have been doing it always, no? And dare I say, at the risk of being an extremist, that everything happening right now with Sean Freud, that just makes no sense at all, makes a lot of sense when you realize that Christianity represents Canada's moral foundation. It might not be something you believe in today, but when you go back to what this country was founded on, a belief in a higher power, not the government, personal responsibility, family, sovereignty, faith over state is what created what we have. And in order for a technocratic rule, for globalism and top-down values to replace it, that foundation must be dismantled.
The anti-Christian bigotry is strong in this city. You know, I haven't done a lot of stuff in Montreal, but that's what they were warning me, that the attacks against Christians is a real thing. And I appreciate that. You know, I think that that's a really good thing to have police officers that are standing up for the freedom of worship. So I commend them for that.
But it's because you don't have a permit to have your concert.
I don't think you need a permit to worship in a church.
You don't have to, because it's Religious Freedom, Radio Canada. It's religious freedom. Do you know that? Religious freedom. You don't need a permit to worship, Radio Canada.
Well, you have to research your laws on that.
My God, it's incredible.
Worshiping
Research
in a church,
Article 176 of the Criminal Code.
Thanks, guys.
Research that. You don't need a permit to worship God, Radio Canada.
Isn't it just weird that there's this guy that literally almost nobody in the country even knew about, who suddenly the CBC starts saying, oh, this mega conservative, Trump-supporting Christian singer's coming into town, and there's all of these public safety concerns, not because of him and his team, but because of counter-protests. They say there's potential for division or harm, that there's community safety at risk. From a performance inside of a church? Excuse me? Well, that's weird. And then they say, oh, it's because he didn't have a permit to perform inside of a church. And what about all of the planned events for the Indian community or perhaps the Muslim community that have taken place on beaches in the middle of roadways? I don't think those guys had permits, and I definitely don't remember there being this kind of backlash at all. And so that's their reasoning, but then they frame it. Mega, Trump, Christian. Look at these protests. Well, why aren't you taking out the people then who are planning those protests, who are throwing smoke bombs on stage at a church? Why aren't you going after those guys? Why aren't you incarcerating them or something? Because they're outside and oh, wait a second. Look at what they're protesting outside. Now, if there is some new information that comes out or a missing puzzle piece that makes sense of this story, please share it with me, because I have searched a lot trying to find an answer that makes sense, that isn't as hard as I'm about to get, and I haven't been able to find one, because the full picture of what happened, what the threats were, as far as I can tell at this moment in time, was that there was a peaceful Christian singer who led worship inside of a church. The scene outside was a radical political riot. As we can see, the flags that protesters are holding are upside down Canadian flags, something that I do certainly recall being called a radical extremist for. I actually remember Justin Trudeau's best friend mocking upside down flags, which can be viewed as either a rejection of the country itself or a sign that the country needs help. It's globally kind of viewed in that way, as well as Palestinian flags, which would signal allegiance with anti-Western causes. Those signs that read ni patrie ni patron, which is French for no country, no boss. It's also a very popular anarchist slogan. Antifa, allegedly, very much a part of this one, which is also a signal of far left militant activism that may or may not be planted. Masks, keffiyehs, black bloc attire, all very classic signs of Antifa protesting in today's day and age, as well as smoke bombs deployed in or near the church venue. And despite all of that, the police were trying to crack down on the church. In fact, it was reported that they are fining the church where Sean's concerts were attempted to be canceled. It wasn't on those protesters. And so to me, what this proves is that this wasn't a counter protest. I actually don't think this was a protest of anything that had more meaning other than an ideological assault on Canadian Christianity, Canada as a whole, as well as our own charter of rights and freedoms, including expression and religion. And yet you have the CBC out there allegedly harassing people about, why are you at this show? I don't know, because I'm a Christian and a fan. That's why. Do you want to come in? No? You just want stories for your propaganda machine? Got it. And the police and everybody involved there, and now Sean had said that the police were very kind to him overall, and I'm sure most of those police officers think that why they're there is freaking insane, but they can't do anything about it. Because one, it doesn't matter if they do. We don't have penalties here. There's no consequences for your bad behavior. And two, we have a two-tiered policing system where you can't do anything, because if you do, you're the bad person. It's not the people that are doing the bad things, it's you for calling it out. And as my pal Jasper says, so in Canada, Muslims can pray all over the street and sing about eradicating Jews from the Middle East, but how dare a Christian singer and worship leader come to Canada to worship Christ? And Sean Foyt says, I've been in touch with senior White House officials and they are watching what is unfolding with blatant Christian persecution in Canada. We're keeping all receipts too. So again, you have a government that was elected by the people democratically that is villainized in Canada for what? Because they're not on board with the type of insanity that is happening here. And all of that to say that I truly am at a point where through my research, through many episodes, you can take a look back at so many of them where we unpack all of this, that the Liberal Carney government isn't just accidentally hurting Canada. It's not something that's, like, oh, shoot, we totally screwed up, we're going to fix that. They're very much reshaping the system to create dependence, disillusionment, as well as control. When the media paints a Christian singing worship songs at a church as more dangerous than the mobs screaming for Intifada, that's not journalism. That is narrative warfare. And they're not canceling Sean Foyt. They're canceling Western civilization one church at a time. This is not about safety. This is about showing you which beliefs are no longer welcome in Canada. That may also be why the federal government has yet to speak at all about all of the churches burned down either. And when housing is unaffordable and out of reach and you don't have a job, something really scary happens that we've seen in history, which is where if they can't even afford to move out or build wealth or start families, guess what they rely on? Government subsidies. They rely on student loans. They rely on basic income like programs, which is something the NDP at least has long been calling for because it's relief, it's helping, it's better, it's good for everybody. When in reality, it is a Band-Aid over the root cause that they planned all along. And mass immigration, cheap labor over youth development is a huge problem in this country. And no wonder Canadians can't find jobs when the government is importing 1.4 million people a year, when foreign workers are filling entry-level roles that most of us had when we were teenagers, and they're undercutting wages and also increasing competition and decreasing your ability to ask for a raise even though you deserve one because there's somebody else there who's just desperate to line up and do it for the bare minimum that's offered. When they are offering MAID to veterans, to homeless people, this is all documented, to people who cannot afford to live, to people who are suffering due to how awful our end of life care is, but then can justify sending millions to Gaza, among so many other regions. And then they turn around and blame you, the people who built this country, for why the country is falling apart. It's your fault, because you didn't want to sell your home and pay us all of those other capital gains taxes. Yeah, that's your fault. It's your fault because your religion is what's making all of these protests happen, so we just need to get rid of it. We need to cancel it, and we're going to cheer on doing that. Something is very, very wrong. And I'm noticing this pattern of the blame always landing on natural-born Canadians or natural-born North Americans. And as far as I can tell, This isn't just incompetence. It is controlled demolition of a free nation to be replaced by fractured, silenced, borderless society where it is intentional to make people afraid and scared to speak up because it is very clear that their interests are not for Canadians. Their interests are for the future that they're creating. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Very excited to read your comments down below. Make sure you subscribe, follow, like, and share this video. And I will talk to you on Monday or Tuesday, maybe Monday. I haven't decided yet. I'll talk to you soon.